MAGA Mike Johnson just did something absolutely stunning. He shut down the entire House of Representatives and sent everyone home right before one of the most significant document releases in recent political history. The timing here is not a coincidence. Congress just went on vacation, abandoning Washington, D.C. entirely, leaving Donald Trump completely alone to deal with what is arguably the day he's been dreading the most. The Epstein files are being released today. And rather than standing with Trump, rather than being there to help control the narrative, the entire Republican establishment just evacuated the Capitol. They're gone, they fled, and now Trump is left scrambling with over 1,000 national security personnel working overtime to redact documents and hide information that he desperately doesn't want the American people to see. This is massive. This is the Republican Party essentially saying, "You're on your own, Donald." And I'm going to walk you through exactly what's happening, why MAGA Mike shut down Congress at this specific moment, and what Trump is doing right now to try to hide information from these files. But real quick, before we get into this, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built John Brown's show, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe, because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what just happened. On December 18th, 2025, Speaker Mike Johnson issued an official designation. He declared the period from Thursday, December 18th through Monday, January 5th, 2026 as a district work period. That's congressional speak for vacation. The House is closed, everyone goes home, no votes, no sessions, no business, and just like that, MAGA Mike gavelled out and Congress is gone. Now, on the surface, this might seem like normal end-of-year congressional procedure, but the timing is what makes this so revealing. Because today is the day the Epstein files are supposed to be released. Today is the day that thousands of pages of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein are supposed to become public. And rather than being in Washington to help manage the fallout, rather than being there to create counter-narratives or hold hearings or do anything to distract from these files, the entire Republican caucus just left. They abandoned Washington, D.C. They abandoned Trump. And that tells you everything you need to know about how terrified Republicans are of what might be in these documents. Because if there was nothing to worry about, why would you shut down Congress and send everyone home right before a major document release? If these files were no big deal, why would you need everyone out of town when they drop? The answer is obvious. Republicans don't want to be anywhere near Washington, D.C. when these files become public. They don't want to be asked questions. They don't want to be put in a position where they have to defend Trump or distance themselves from him. They don't want to deal with the media circus. So they just left. They're hiding in their districts, hoping this all blows over before they have to come back in January. And here's what makes this even more significant. There was another major issue that Congress could have addressed before going on vacation. Remember the Affordable Care Act subsidy extension? A discharge petition was signed by 218 members of Congress. 4 Republicans joined with Democrats to force a vote on extending healthcare subsidies for 22 to 24 million Americans. There were enough votes to bring this to the floor. There were probably enough votes to pass it. But MAGA Mike refused to allow the vote. He shut down Congress instead. So not only did Republicans flee Washington to avoid the Epstein files, they also left millions of Americans without healthcare certainty going into the new year. They chose political self-preservation over helping people afford health insurance. That's where we are right now. Now let's talk about what Trump is doing while Republicans are running away. According to a new CNN report from late last night, there is massive frustration mounting at the Department of Justice as they race to redact portions of the Epstein files. And the scale of this redaction effort is stunning. Trump has directed hundreds, perhaps over 1,000 national security personnel to go through these files and perform additional redactions. We're talking about FBI agents, counterterrorism officials, cyber division personnel, national security division officials, all working to hide information from the American people. Think about that for a moment. Over 1,000 government employees are being pulled away from their actual jobs to redact documents that are supposed to be released to the public. That's not normal. That's not standard procedure for document releases. That's Trump using government resources on a massive scale to cover up information. And this isn't the first time this has happened. Back in March, journalist Jason Leopold from Bloomberg filed a Freedom of Information Act request. What he discovered was shocking. During just 1 week in March, specifically between March 15th and March 22nd, there were 934 FBI agents and other personnel reviewing files related to this release. They clocked in 14,278 premium pay hours. They were paid over $851,000 in overtime, just in 1 week. And that involved the Counterterrorism Division, the Cyber Division, and national security officials. So we had about 1,000 personnel working on redactions back in March. And now we have over 1,000 personnel working on redactions again, right before today's scheduled release. That's 2 massive redaction efforts using thousands of government employees and costing taxpayers potentially millions of dollars in overtime, all to hide information about Jeffrey Epstein. And here's what's really telling. According to The Telegraph, Republicans have been given talking points on how to deflect attention from Trump ahead of the Epstein file release. The GOP strategy is simple. Blame Democrats for everything. That's it. That's their entire plan. Don't address what's actually in the files. Don't answer questions about Trump's relationship with Epstein. Just blame Democrats and hope people get distracted. And speaking of distractions, the Trump administration has been desperately trying to create them. Yesterday, Jim O'Neill, the Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services, gave a speech focusing entirely on transgender issues. He stood up there and said, "Men are men. Women are women. Men can never become women. Women can never become men." And you're thinking, wait, what does this have to do with the real problems facing Americans right now? People are struggling to afford housing. People are living paycheck to paycheck. People are worried about losing their healthcare subsidies. And the Trump administration's response is to give speeches attacking the transgender community. That's the distraction playbook. That's what they do whenever they need to change the subject. Attack marginalized communities, create culture war controversies, get people arguing about bathrooms instead of asking questions about Epstein. And it's not working. People see through it. They're not getting distracted this time. Another attempted distraction, Trump's claim that inflation has dropped dramatically. He posted on social media that inflation is at its lowest level, but people aren't buying it. The comments on his posts tell the whole story. Yeah, inflation is the highest it's been. I ain't no liberal, but how come everything is more expensive now? All you do is lie. Show me your numbers. Because people know the numbers have been manipulated. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported zero inflation for rent and housing in October and November. How? Because during the government shutdown, they just assumed zero instead of collecting actual data. And for consumer goods, they heavily weighted Black Friday sales data to make inflation look lower. They used the one period when everything is on sale to calculate the monthly inflation rate. That's not honest economic reporting, that's manipulation. And people can see it because they're still struggling to afford groceries and rent. The lived experience doesn't match the manipulated numbers. Now let's talk about another scandal that emerged yesterday. Trump announced he's giving $1,776 checks to 1.45 million troops as a warrior dividend. He made it sound like a generous gift from his administration to military personnel. But Defense One did some actual journalism and discovered what's really happening. Those checks are coming from a $2.9 billion fund that Congress specifically allocated to help military members afford housing. Trump is taking money meant for military housing assistance and converting it into one-time bonus checks so his administration can take credit for being generous to troops. That's a shell game. That's taking congressionally appropriated housing funds and repackaging them as Trump bonuses. And in the process, military families lose the ongoing housing support they were counting on. But Trump gets a good headline about giving money to troops. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice under Trump's leadership is falling apart. Over the past 8 weeks, the dismissal rate of criminal complaints in D.C. has risen to 21% compared to 0.5% over the past decade. Let that sink in. The normal dismissal rate is half of 1%. Under Trump's DOJ, it's now 21%. Why? Because competent prosecutors are leaving or being fired. They're being replaced with loyalists who don't know what they're doing. They're charging cases that shouldn't be charged. They're making errors. They're pursuing politically motivated prosecutions instead of following the evidence. And the result is that cases are getting dismissed at 40 times the normal rate. That's what happens when you gut an institution and replace professionals with political operatives. And what else has Trump been focused on while all this chaos unfolds? He illegally renamed the Kennedy Center to the Trump Kennedy Center without congressional authorization. Changing the name of a federally designated building requires an act of Congress. Trump just did it anyway. He had the website changed, and now performers are questioning whether they want to be associated with what's essentially become a crime scene since the renaming violated federal law. Trump also announced a $6 billion merger between Trump Media and AE Technologies, a fusion power company. Now, fusion energy is still experimental. There are no commercial fusion power plants operating anywhere in the world. So why would Trump's failing social media company merge with an experimental energy company? Perhaps because fusion companies need Department of Energy approvals and federal grants. And by merging with a company owned by the president, they gain access to those agencies. The stock jumped 33% on the announcement, personally enriching Trump. This is what's been described as state-sponsored capitalism rather than actual free market capitalism. Everything runs through the White House. Every business decision is made based on whether it aligns with Trump's interests. That's not capitalism. That's closer to what you see in authoritarian systems. As Andrew Ross Sorkin explained, we're now in a system where CEOs and business leaders make their decisions based on whether their strategy aligns with what the president wants, whether he'll agree or disagree, whether he might sue them or punish them. That's a fundamental shift. That's more similar to systems in China or Russia than to American capitalism. And through all of this, Trump keeps sending pathetic fundraising emails to supporters. This is your direct line. Your unwavering support has not gone unnoticed. Can I have some money? Or, you have an invitation from Donald J. Trump. Should I host a meeting with you at Mar-a-Lago or Trump Tower? It's desperate. It's sad. But it also reveals how Trump views his supporters as ATMs to fund his lifestyle and legal bills. Now, as we wait for the Epstein files to be released today, House Oversight Committee Democrats released additional photos from Epstein's estate yesterday. The materials show troubling content that raises serious questions. And we're going to be tracking closely what gets released today, what gets redacted, and what Trump is trying to hide. Because the scale of the redaction effort, over 1,000 government personnel working to hide information, tells you that Trump is terrified of what might become public. So let's recap what happened. MAGA Mike Johnson shut down Congress and sent all Republicans home right before the Epstein files release. Trump has over 1,000 national security personnel working to redact documents. Republicans have been given talking points to blame Democrats and deflect from Trump. The administration is creating desperate distractions by attacking marginalized communities and manipulating economic data. And Trump has been caught running shell games with military pay, illegally renaming federal buildings, and merging his companies with businesses that need federal approvals. This is the day Trump feared most, and his own party abandoned him. They left Washington. They fled to their districts. They're hiding from the fallout because they know what's coming. They know the Epstein files are going to raise serious questions about Trump's past. They know the redaction effort looks like a cover-up. They know the American people are going to ask why over 1,000 government employees are being used to hide information. And Republicans don't want to be there to answer those questions. So they ran. They left Trump alone in D.C. to deal with the consequences of his own actions. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because we're going to be covering the Epstein file release extensively. We're going to be tracking what gets released, what gets redacted, and what information Trump is desperately trying to hide from the American people. Because this matters. This is about transparency. This is about accountability. This is about whether powerful people can use government resources to cover up their past. And we're not going to let this story get buried under distractions and manipulated talking points. Share this video with everyone you need to know because people need to understand what's happening. Congress just shut down to avoid dealing with this. Over 1,000 government personnel are working to redact information. Trump's own party abandoned him on the day he feared most. This is the day of reckoning Trump has been dreading, and now it's here. Stay tuned.